Today we'll be doing a team audit for Matt. He graciously listened to the last team audit. I don't know if people know about this cool idea yet, but basically we're gonna go through his team and his extra picks, and then talk about kind of what his future is and what kind of moves he can make. Identify those areas of need and things like that. Thank you for joining. Glad you're here.
Very much. Can I start kind of like framing my goals as I see them without
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
think year one, I want the year two, the first overall pick. In year three, be competing for the playoffs, and then in year four, be competing for a championship.
Okay,
That's kind of my
so your hope
yeah.
is like in 3 years you'll be competing, and then the fourth year you'll be dominating forever. Is your idea?
Like
Uh,
it's not going to be disappointing if I don't have like a Waldrop or David level team in year four,
mhm,
but anyone will at that point.
right.
I
Yeah,
think all the teams will be a little bit different.
all the teams will be different by then, so you might not need a dominant team to be, the best out of the group. At that point, people could be pretty out of players, and a lot of retired players at that point, and you'll have all the new players. So I think that's a pretty realistic goal. It's honestly super hard to predict what's going to happen in the next year, much less the next 2 years. So I would honestly say you should be trying to be competitive in 2 years. But we'll see what that takes. But that
Or next season,
yeah. So next season maybe you don't win it all, but just like being a competitive team that could make the playoffs. You could try again for that number one pick like you're talking about, but I think it makes sense to try and have your window like 2 years instead of 3 years, in my mind, because three, anything could happen. Like a lot of these young guys could be out of the league. But I think with that in mind, we'll talk as we go here. So let's just look at your players. Let's look at what you got. So, like I said before, I like to write out what people have. I'll zoom in a little bit here so people can see it better. Um, so we've got QBs. We've got Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson, Jordan Love, and Kyle Trask. Almost said trash, which might have been appropriate. And then we've got some running backs, Cam Akers. Kenneth Walker should have been the next on this list. And then kind of a bunch of forgettable dudes. Kyron Williams might be something. Got a ton of wide receivers. Sky Moore, Romeo Dubs, Christian Watson, Traylon Burks, Khalil Shakir are all interesting. And then tight end is the strong spot, Kyle Pitts. And we've got so far one extra pick. Um, so I look at this, and we try to identify core players. To me, the core players right now are it's very questionable. Like what I would call core players. There's one for sure, and it's Kyle Pitts. Like to me, that is an obvious no-brainer. Kyle Pitts is a guy you shouldn't trade. You should just see what he is. If he's bad for a year, who cares? If they get a new quarterback, he could be amazing. But then after that, are there other guys that you consider core players on your team?
I think even even ideal. I think it's in the very high probability realm that Deshaun Watson is a top five dynasty quarterback at the end of the year.
Yep, that is within the realm
So
of possibility.
say Deshaun Watson is a core player.
The crowd
And
boos. But yes, okay. So you're saying Deshaun Watson, and then what else?
had been a rookie draft. I looked on Keep Trade Cut, and I have 4 of the top 14 rookies. So basically, like 4 first-round rookies if we were doing a rookie draft. So like if we started the dynasty 2 years ago and whatever.
Yeah.
So for me, that means the core is Sky Moore, Christian Watson, Traylon Burks, and Kenneth Walker.
Okay. So I think that's fair. I would say guys like Sky Moore and Christian Watson could be anything. And if someone comes with the right deal, core players to me are dudes like Justin Jefferson that you don't trade away for pretty much anything. That you want to build your team around these players for sure. And while I kind of agree with you that those are guys you probably don't want to just trade for anything, but I feel like the right offer came. I could see him off your team.
A core player, someone who would be a core player on any team, not my team.
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yep.
Yeah.
Then that makes sense.
Yeah. So I feel like these two really solidify the list. The only other person that I'm like, even especially after watching week one, the only other person I'm tempted to put on here is Traylon Burks, but I feel like it's too early. He looked amazing out there. He didn't play a ton of snaps, but he's like got all that asthma issue stuff. So I'm sure he'll get that all figured out. And then Kenneth Walker, I like him too a lot. So I wouldn't like actively be trading either of those two guys for sure. Off the top of it. But the rest I'm feeling like could be traded for the right price. But
it would either be for like a high level pick package, or to do like a little tier grade to like Drake London.
Yep.
Or a lot would be kind of the other.
Okay, so with Deshaun Watson, I think it makes a lot of sense to have him as a core player. Like, one of the things when you look at this team, right, there aren't a ton of guys that can score, like, are definitely going to score you points in the NFL. Like, you don't know. There's a lot of unknowns here, and a lot of guys could possibly bust. And having somebody who's done it before, he's like the only person besides Pitts who has proven it before at a very high level in fantasy. So I definitely think he's worth keeping unless some just absolutely crazy offer comes your way, because you have the QB position in a good spot, and he could be good for a long time. So I agree.
We start 8 players, right?
Yep.
And so have 2 of those locked in Pitts and Watson for like when the team is competitive.
Right. Yeah, and it is a smaller starting lineup, so that's good to think about. Is like a quarter of the starting lineups locked in pretty safely.
So it'd be great if that competitive team, if 3 of my other players are starters on that.
Yeah. And I don't think you're going to figure that out by the end of this year with some of these guys like Sky Moore and Christian Watson. I think Christian Watson's going to get a lot of opportunities, but like he drops a lot of passes, and he did that in college. I mean, we saw he dropped that big 75-yard bomb from Rodgers this past weekend. Like, he's going to be in and out of the doghouse. He's super athletic, but maybe he figures it out and hits, and that could be one of your guys. I think you're more likely to find out from him than you will Sky Moore, because Sky Moore, the Chiefs just look so good. I don't even know if they need him, to be honest. But we'll see. But they don't really need him right now. He's kind of like their special teams dude, which does get points in our league. But I don't know how startable he'll be. But you're really hoping that Traylon Burks is something. You're really hoping Kenneth Walker's something. And then we haven't talked about it, but Trevor Lawrence is a good player. Is he going to rise to like top 14 QB status by the end of this year? That's that's something you're looking for and would be a nice luxury. Then you could trade one of the two, Watson or Lawrence for picks, and that would be really helpful. But let's. So we've already answered this next question of like what draft capital you have. It's all right here, but let's just talk about that really fast. So you've got a 2023 first, which we're projecting right now in week 1 that it would be kind of late. Likely a playoff team.
12, yeah.
Yeah. So then 3/4, which you don't really want to keep those. You want to package those to get better picks. And then a second, which is really nice. A second could be somebody good. Like this year, you could get somebody like Damian Pierce, who maybe is something. We don't know after week 1, but he was a 2nd-round pick. So our next question is very easy. Is this team contending this year realistically? And we've already talked about that, which is no. So what are the areas of need? And I think we've got QB and tight end locked up. It's just running back and wide receiver. Wide receiver's in a better spot, so running back is the biggest need because you don't really have anybody right now that is good. In terms of
I kind of have I basically have. If you think about it, he's just not playing for me yet.
Oh, Bijan? Yes. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So you're hoping that your 2023 first gets you a running back. So Matt's 2023 first gets an instant starter here. So that gets you one of your spots. And then you're hoping that, Cam Akers or Kenneth Walker turn it around. Kenneth Walker hasn't had much time in his career yet. He just, we'll see what he does. Rashad Penny's kind of in the way right now and looks decent. That offense as a whole looks not great, but whatever. So then Akers, yeah, you're really hoping he turns into something. But if he doesn't, not the biggest deal in the world. So how do you... And then what about wide receiver? So right now with wide receiver, I think I feel pretty confident saying Treylon Burks is going to be a startable wide receiver, like a top 24 dude once, especially next season. And then outside, I mean, that's reaching a little bit, but just off of 1 week. But so then what do you have? You got one starter from your pick. You've got your QB and your tight end locked up, and you've got maybe one starter here. So, you've got a bunch of people that could turn into something, and that's good. So wide receiver is like less of a need. So hopefully one of these guys turns into something, and then you need flex plays like badly. I guess I'll just put that here, like flex plays. Because like we can start, squinting our eyes here and being like, yeah, maybe Christian Watson, maybe Sky Moore, maybe Romeo Doubs, something like that. But that 3rd and 4th spot with flex are really, really murky right now. Do you agree with that?
They're probably not on my team yet.
Right. Yeah, they're not on your team yet. Okay. So the last question is, what can this team afford to trade? And actually, trying to think about what can you realistically try to do with this team over the course of the year. And I don't think you want to give up any young players because they're your lottery tickets. You've already punched a lot of lottery tickets. But to me, you should be targeting 2023 and 2024 firsts and seconds, in my mind. However, you can put a trade package together to get those. those will be your bread and butter for building this team up quickly, because thirds and fourths, especially in a 14-team league, that's something we have to make clear here. Thirds and fourths don't really give you a shot at a great player. It's like a serviceable, somebody who might be a flex play several years from now or something like that. But you're really targeting those firsts and seconds. So you got an extra first. So maybe that's like a 12. Let's say that's the 10th through 12th pick, and that guy could be a flex play in a year. But yeah, so I like the idea of like packaging thirds or fourths with the player to try to move up and get a second. I think that's something you should or could investigate. And that could be like any of these guys, besides like Kenneth Walker and Akers. I don't know. He's kind of an interesting spot. But what do you think in terms of trade targets? What are you thinking about, and who are you thinking about trading in general?
Only ones that at the height of their value.
Mm-hmm. So
First are Akers and Watson.
Akers and Watson.
The ones that I'd want to trade and would be worth, not want to trade, but be willing to trade a first at least on their own.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. You'd want to get a first back for those guys. Akers, you're just hoping gets healthy, and then he's an actual starter for you. And then next year,
someone else.
Yeah, or he could be a starter for someone else. So, draft picks are a great way to build up your running back room, and later draft picks are a good way to build up your wide receiver room. So, yeah, it's hard. It's going to be hard to get running backs this year. So getting picks this year makes a lot of sense to me. Yeah, so competing next year, it's gonna be tough. We'll just have to see how the year plays out. I think being patient with this team will be really important, and not selling some of these young players too early, because they could turn into something. You're tied to a bunch of good offenses here, or in theory. I'm not sure if Green Bay is a good offense anymore now that I say that, but we'll see. So a lot of good stuff. I would think Albert O would be somebody you could trade. Rex Burkhead would be someone you could trade. One of your quarterbacks, if they both look good, would be a trade guy. And like you said, Akers. Outside of that, there's a bunch of young guys here, and you got a bunch of the really like hot names for tight end here too. So one of these guys could turn into something that would be tradable. You don't need to start a tight end, right? Like you've got your starter forever. You don't ever have to think about these guys. So these guys are trade fodder to me.
Did this discussion change if I still had AJ Brown on my team?
Yeah. I think, well, at least AJ Brown is like a starter, right? That would put up points and would be like a core player in my mind. He's still young. So it'd just be one less starting spot that you're trying to fill out. But I do think you could get a lot for him now. I mean, after week 1, he looked pretty good. But yeah, you would just be one step closer, and wide receivers aren't going to like fall off a cliff like running backs, in theory. So you would just be a step closer in my mind if you had a starter with him, to competing. And so maybe that year too is
one.
Go ahead.
And with the moves that Zach made, I kind of like AJ Brown would make my team too good for the number 1 pick. Like his team looks a little rough.
Yeah,
next team
maybe.
now with
Yeah,
looking a little rough.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, he could score you out of the first pick, but it's pretty random to be honest. Like it just depends on who you play every week, and AJ Brown wouldn't have won you the week this week, but
Not with Akers and Tutu.
yeah, but yeah, I just like the idea. It's you've really what you've done. You've set yourself up for a longer rebuild by not having those established kind of young players on your team yet. If you had like Kyle Pitts and a Justin Jefferson or somebody like that, you were already building around, it just makes it a little easier. You're one step closer, and you've got that elite player. But you've got to now find those elite players. We'll see if AJ Brown's elite. No one knew what it was going to be like. People thought it was going to be a run heavy team, so maybe that'll be what it's like week 2. But it's also in the past, so who cares? You just got to work on the future, which is second round picks and first round picks, and taking shots at young guys. I think another thing we didn't talk about was just like maybe taking shots on guys who have a couple bad weeks that you like, that are young. You could try and make a package for them, and see if that works out with some of these trade pieces to try and fill out your roster later on. But I don't know. It's hard to say. But I think your team's going to be really interesting after your draft next year. It would be nice if you had more firsts. I would really like it if you had like 2 or 3 more firsts by the end of the year. But I don't know the best path for that.
Just don't see the path. Exactly.
Yeah. So yeah. I mean, what? Yeah. And if a young player starts playing well, you just want to keep them for the most part. Maybe these tight ends or QB. Those are really the places that you can afford, you can spare to send something off.
I think I would also send Romeo Doubs off if he's playing well and someone wants him, because I feel like he's just going to be closer to his ceiling now, like earlier in his career.
I like that kind of thought process. I do that with guys like Darnell Mooney, who I think is talented enough, but he's not like super athletic. So if Mooney was on your team, he'd be a guy like I would be ready to trade, because I don't think he's like a core kind of player, but he could be a good starter for a team. Any closing thoughts before we wrap this up?
Nope. I just think anyone that doesn't want the first round pick and wants to send it to me, we should talk.
Absolutely. Well, good luck. Wish you the best of luck.